Not history.
Smells like burning. First the smoke, then the fire, then the timbers!
Hello everyone, my name is Sarafi and I'm happy to meet you all. And today we're going to be talking about Annie, the Dark Child. Annie is one of the most interesting characters I've found in the Path of Champions for Legends of Runeterra, and I think that she is a great character for people to start with because she's easy to use, she's unique, and most importantly, she's cheap. So let's talk about it and let's see how you guys can play this card and this deck and get a lot of good wins. To start with, the main thing that makes Annie unique compared to all the other characters in Path of Champions is that she's 1 mana. Annie being 1 mana is very beneficial to new players in particular because it's very good to be able to start ramping up your champion and getting a strong board presence the very first turn of the game. Now, when you get more champions at 2 stars, where they have 2 mana at the start of the game, the cost of the champions becomes less relevant, although still very important. But Annie will still always be like a card that's a really good card on turn 1, especially once you get to level 20 with her, and you always open a champion in your opening hand. 50% chance really to get Annie, and you can get more item cards on her to get more copies of her in your deck to make sure that she is the card that you're drawing every game. Really, really strong card to just play on turn 1, especially if you have the attack token. Now, Annie is a 1 mana 0/2, and her ability is attack, I deal 2 damage to my blocker. So she plays a skill when she attacks that deals 2 damage to any unit that blocks her, basically making her a 1 mana 2/2. But she doesn't take any damage if she kills her blocker with the skill. So she's like a 1 mana 2/2 with quick attack that can't block, basically. Interesting idea, and it's a lot of fun. If the blocker is dead or gone, I deal 2 damage to the enemy nexus instead. So if Annie is not blocked, she still deals 2 damage just to the enemy nexus, and if you remove a unit from the enemy team, like by stunning it, then Annie's damage will go to the nexus instead. Pretty useful. Annie levels up by seeing you play 6 fast spells, slow spells, or skills. And when she levels up, you get a copy of Tibbers, which is excellent. So Annie actually gets 19 cards in her starting deck, not 18, because you get a free copy of Tibbers when she levels up. Very, very good effect. Playing 6 fast spells, slow spells, or skills can be somewhat difficult, but that's why you want to play Annie on turn 1 so that you can start by using her skill immediately. Annie's leveled up form is, of course, a 1/3, and it has attack, I deal 3 to my blocker, and stun it. So that's fantastic. Annie is able to not only hit her blocker without taking any damage, but she removes them from combat. So now, she's not just a quick attacker against units that have 2 or less health, she's a quick attacker against everything. She doesn't take any damage if she's blocked because she's stunning whoever she blocks. Excellent. Now, both of these abilities really, really good for a 1-cost unit. But we have Annie's star powers to add even more fire to the fire. Annie's tier 1 star power is called Pyromania, and it says your spells and your skills deal 1 extra damage. That applies to any spells or skills in your deck, and it also applies to any cards that you pick up or that you create in the middle of the game. Dealing 1 bonus damage is very, very powerful, especially for just 10 fragments. Now, Annie is a Noxian champion, and that's relevant because pretty early on for new players, you will get a Noxian champion vault, which gives you 40 champion shards for a Noxian character that you don't already have. That's how I got Samira, I believe. So if you get Annie with the 40 champion shards, you'll be able to immediately unlock her and also get the first rank of Pyromania. Great. Annie's 2nd star power is called Playful Trick. Like every other 2-star power, it gives you 1 extra starting mana. That means that when you summon Annie on turn 1, you will still have 1 mana left over to either play Disintegrate or Guile or maybe save it for another turn. Additionally, Every turn, you create a fleeting copy of Guile in your hand. What is Guile? Guile is a 1-mana slow spell that stuns an enemy unit. That's extremely beneficial for Annie because Annie is essentially playing a burn deck. One of the biggest problems with burn, you guys might have noticed in Duel Links, is that burn tends to get destroyed. They don't have enough time to burn the opponent down, so getting a free stall card that's really, really cheap in your hand every single turn is fantastic, and it also really helps you to make sure that you can level Annie up, because each copy of Guile also counts for 1 use of Annie's level up reward. Now, Guile is good on the offense and on the defense. It prevents a blocker from even challenging Annie or one of your other units, and then it also allows you to prevent a monster from attacking you, so you don't even have to worry about blocking it. That helps Annie's poor stats, and just being able to just do it every single turn, no matter what you draw, is really good. It's essentially, this card guarantees that you will always have something to do with your spell mana, which is very useful, and it also means that you can't really brick too much as long as you have Annie, because every turn you are advancing her towards leveling up. It's also nice that this is every turn, as opposed to if you have the attack token, which is what a lot of other generate cards do, so you don't have to worry about that. And then if you get to her final star power, which costs 40, so the second star power costs 20, this one costs 40. Pyromania 2. Your spells and your skills deal 2 extra damage. That is obviously an upgrade to Pyromania. It doesn't stack with it, so you just deal 2 extra damage with all of your spells and all of your skills. Okay, so when we look at that, we know that Annie then is going to deal 4 damage in her base form and 5 damage in her evolved form. That's a lot of damage for a 1-cost unit, obviously. But Annie is not the only card in the deck. The deck revolves around skills. So let's take a look at some of the other skills that you can pick up and see how this Pyromania ability can really benefit you. We'll start with Tibbers. Tibbers is the free card that you get from leveling Annie up. It is a 6-mana Noxian unit with Fearsome. 5/5, on summon, stun an enemy, then deal 2 damage to all stunned and damaged enemies. So Tibbers, when it's summoned, will choose an enemy to stun. That's really good. Stunning an enemy, that's going to prevent them from blocking, prevent them from attacking. Very nice. And then all units that are already stunned, which you could stun them with Guile, you can stun them with some other cards in your deck, or damaged, which they get damaged all the time, then they take 2 damage. And that's before Pyromania. 3 damage if you have 1 Pyromania, 4 damage if you have 2. Now, a 6-cost card, pretty expensive for Path of Champions, but don't worry, very early on, Annie actually gets a Nomad's Medallion to upgrade Tibbers. So Nomad's Medallion reduces its cost by 2. Before you even get to level 10, Tibbers will be a 4-mana card. That makes it very easy to play on any given turn, especially when you combine it with Guile. Okay, now that we've taken a look at that card, let's take a look at the rest of the deck. Annie's champion spell is called Disintegrate. It is a 2-mana spell that costs is a fast spell. You choose a unit, and the next time it takes 1 or more damage this round, kill it. Pretty good. So you can target a unit that has 9 health, and then when it gets blocked by one of your 1/1 spiderlings, it dies. That's essentially 1 mana deal 8. That's perfect. And it also advances Annie's skills, and it triggers Mana Soul Student's ability. So this is, I think, the only real spell in the deck other than Death's Hand. So it's a great card. And then, of course, if you have more copies of Annie in your deck and you draw her, this will be the card that you get. It has a lot of synergy with the rest of her deck, so it's not that big of a deal. Even though it doesn't do anything on its own, it's very good and very easy to combo with. The only real problem, you can't chain to skills. You don't get the ability to change to skills. Your opponent can chain to your skills, but you can't chain to your own skills like you can chain to spells. So you can't summon Tibbers or summon a unit that will deal damage with a skill and then chain Disintegrate to that. You have to play Disintegrate first, and then by playing Disintegrate, you have to pass to your opponent. So keep that in mind. Allegiance Saboteur, 1 mana, 2/1. When it attacks, you, as a skill, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. So deal 3 to the enemy nexus with this 1 mana unit, and it's already got 2 attacks. So again, it's just like Annie. It's like Annie will deal 4 damage when she attacks, and Legion Saboteur will deal 5. So you can see you are very aggressive on turn 1. If you open 2 Legion Saboteurs, that's 10 damage and 2 skills on the stack already. Now, Annie has to see the skills to be played for her level up, but the Conservatorium, which we'll talk about in a minute, does not. Next up, we have House Spider, 2 mana, 2/2. When I'm summon a Spiraling. Spiraling is a 1/1. This is not a skill. It's probably the only card in her deck that doesn't really have synergy with her strategy, which is standard, really. A lot of decks have like some synergy, and then there's like 1 or 2 cards that are just generically good cards, and being able to get a couple blockers so that you can make sure that you don't die is pretty useful. Alright, now we get to the good stuff. Spellslinger. Spellslinger is a 2 mana, 1/1 spider with Fearsome, and it says, on play, stun an enemy, or if the enemy is already stunned, deal 2 damage to it instead. Excellent. This has perfect synergy with Guile. So you play your free Guile, you stun an enemy. Then you can play Spellslinger and target one of your opponent's enemies to deal 2 damage to it if you have no Pyromania, or if you have 2 Pyromania, you deal 4 damage to it. A 2 mana, 1/1 with Fearsome that deals 4 damage for you and also raises your stacks of Annie. Very, very good card. I would probably play this card like 4 if I could. I grab an item card for this card every time. It's so strong. Next up, we have Death's Hand, a 3 mana fast spell, deal 2 to an enemy and 1 to the enemy nexus. If you have Pyromania, this is 4 to the enemy and 3 to the nexus. It's very important to have a fast spell that deals damage to the enemy nexus, because it gives you a way to end the game on your opponent's turn. If your opponent has the attack token, they're going to try and kill you, and you've already kind of burnt them down. Death's Hand is a way to win the game. Essentially, you had to spend your mana on your turn to set up a board so that you could attack, and then if you ran out of mana, you pass to your opponent, then you can Death's Hand to finish them off. So this is a really good card. I think it's in basically every Noxus deck, this particular card, which is kind of frustrating, but it's just if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? It's just a generically good card, and every Noxus deck is super aggressive, so yeah, I like this card with Annie in particular. I don't like it with any of the other characters, but with Annie, it has great synergy with her skills, so I don't mind it. Alright, next up we have Mana Soul Student. Probably one of the better cards in the deck. Mana Soul Student is a 3 mana, 3/2, and each round, the first time you play a fast spell, a slow spell, or a skill, Mana Soul Student plays Magic Embers. Magic Embers is an elemental skill that deals 1 damage to the enemy nexus. So if you have Pyromania, it deals 3 damage to the enemy nexus. It's a skill, which means that if you play like Guile, which would raise Annie's skill rating by 1, now you get the Magic Embers, you go up to 2. So you've basically doubled the advancement to the Conservatorium and to Annie. Excellent. Great. Annie is just like constantly looking to level up as fast as possible, and every single card in her deck really advances that strategy. So especially early on, when you don't have like too many cards from outside the starting deck, you will find Annie hitting level 2 on like turn 3 or 4 usually. All right, the Prefect. The Prefect is really good. 3 mana, 2/3 with Overwhelm. When you play a fast spell, a slow spell, or a skill, grant me +1/+0, and that is not once per turn. So a lot of times when you attack, if you have, let's say you have Legion Saboteur, you have Annie, and you have Mana Soul Student, that's 3 different skills that will trigger. The Prefect will get +3/+0 before blockers have even been declared, and she has Overwhelm. So she's really, really good. She's basically your finisher card, and excellent card, great synergy. Not every card has to have a skill. Some cards just need to be like Annie. They need to benefit from having skills played, because Annie can't be on the board all the time. So yeah, this is another good option for buffing your deck. And then lastly, we have Captive Greyback. This is a 4 mana, 2/3. It appears to be some kind of shark, but doesn't have Lurk for some reason, which is kind of sad. It is Overwhelm. Attack, I deal 3 damage to my blocker. If it's dead or gone, I deal 3 damage to the enemy nexus instead. So punishing blockers for an Overwhelm unit is very, very strong. And of course, if you have Pyromania 2, this is 5 damage. It is a 4 mana unit with 2 attack, that deals 5 damage on its own. So if it's unblocked, that's 7 damage that you're hitting the enemy Nexus with. And then, of course, you could trigger your Mana Soul Embers, and you could trigger other things. So Captive Greyback, very, very strong card. And you'll notice it's the top of your mana pool. This is a 4 mana card, and it's the most expensive card in your deck, along with Tibbers, which is also 4 mana. So your deck is super cheap and super aggressive. And that's fantastic for new players. I definitely recommend this. Let's quickly go over the cards, the level up benefits. So Legion Saboteurs get Speed Wraps, which gives it quick attack. That makes it much more safe to play aggressively with Legion Saboteur on turn 1. Your opponent has to essentially have 3 health to even kill the Legion Saboteur. Meanwhile, you're still dealing the damage to the Nexus whether she dies or not. The Prefect gets Giant Spelt. That's very, very important. A 3 mana unit with 5 health is pretty strong. It's really hard to get rid of a 5 health on turn 3, and she has Overwhelm. So this will just give her time to build up her attack so that potentially when she does die, she's at least inflicting like 8 or 9 damage on her last attack. So great benefit there. Then on level 4, Tibbers starts with Nomad's Medallion, so Tibbers is now a 4 mana 5/5. 6, we have Disintegrate starts with Mana Potion, so Disintegrate goes from 2 mana to 1 mana. That's fantastic. Disintegrate doesn't need to be any cheaper than that. It's a really, really good card. Then we have Spellslinger starting with Pickaxe, so Spellslinger goes from a 2 mana 1/1 to a 2 mana 3/1. Again, it has Fearsome. Again, it stuns a unit, so making this card even more powerful when you have the attack token is really, really strong. This card will push a lot of damage, both by stunning a blocker and by having 3 attack. Next up, we have at level 12 House Fighter getting Chain Vest. Chain Vest gives it Tough. A 2 mana 2/2 with Tough isn't amazing. We already have that in Demacia, but this card is essentially like this there. This card is essentially just there to block. So yeah, having it being able to take another hit is pretty good. They probably couldn't give this card Giant Spelt because they were given another unit Giant Spelt, so this makes the most sense. Next up, we have Captive Greyback starts with Shadow Totem. That is dumb. That is really, really dumb. So Shadow Totem is an a rare buff that gives, when I'm summoned, summon an ephemeral copy of me. An ephemeral, for those of you that don't remember, is dies at the end of the turn, but it's otherwise an exact copy. So you summon Captive Greyback, the best card in your deck, and then you get another copy of it for free. That card dies at the end of the turn, but then you just attack with both of them, and you deal 5 damage to your blockers twice. You trigger skill buffs twice, and then like if your opponent doesn't block, your 4 mana deal 7 went to 4 mana deal 14. So this is a huge benefit to get on your best card. I don't think I've seen Shadow Totem on the highest cost card in any other deck. Next up, we have Death's Hand starts with Summoning Beacon. Summoning Beacon is summon a follower with my cost from your regions. So if you pick up a non-Noxian champion as your support champion, then you will have a chance to summon a 3-cost non-Noxian card, which would be kind of annoying because it's not on theme for you. But if you stick with Noxus, then you're fine. Or if you play this card before you, like in your first run, then you only summon Noxus. Noxian 3-drops are really, really strong. We've got Trifarian, Reckless Trifarian, which is a 3 mana 5/4 that can't block. We've got the Prefect, which has obviously got huge synergy with your deck, and she comes with her Giant Spelt. We got the 3 mana 4/3 with Overwhelm. Yes, 3 mana 4/3 with Overwhelm. The Ballista. Yeah, so just a really, really good card. I don't have any problems with this. At level 21, Mana Soul Student starts with Warding Charm. This is really, really good. Mana Soul Student is, of course, the card that gives you bonus damage every time you play another skill or spell. So that's the card that you want to stay on the board the longest. And Warding Charm gives it spell shield, so your opponent just has to waste another card to try and remove it from the field. You're not going to block with Mana Soul Student. You're never going to do that. So unless they have Challenger, they're basically not able to get rid of this card because they can't use it for spells anymore. Then we have Mana Soul Student starts with Savage Shield. This comes very late, but it's very, very good. So Mana Soul Student, which is a 3 mana 3/2, turns into a 3 mana 4/5. A 3 mana 4/5 with Spell Shield that you want to just stay on the board forever. Well, yeah, if it's a 3 mana 4/5 with Spell Shield, it's not dying anytime soon. So you're going to get so many embers with this ability. This is a fantastic buff for Annie that didn't need it. This is honestly overkill. I would have gone with like +1+. I would have gone with like the studded leather. I don't think any of her units get studded leather. So yeah, I probably would have gone with studded leather, to be honest. But yeah, giving it +1/+3 is a little insane. All right, and then lastly, we have Disintegrate starts with Elixir of Skill, which is draw a card. So Disintegrate, which is your 1 mana, the next time a unit takes damage, they die, is now drawing you a card. So yeah, very, very good. It's really easy to level Annie up because all of her battles are really fast. She has her own little adventure, so that gives you a free 10 champion fragments, because you can't go on her second adventure until you have her second star, which means that you've already spent 60 fragments on her, but it'll help you get her last ability. So you get 10 free fragments. You get 5 for doing the first one, 5 for doing the second one. So she's really easy to promote, and she's really fast, really easy to play. Lastly, let's talk about her relics. So if you're new to the game, you don't know how the game works, or you don't have that many champions yet, or if you're low level, I definitely recommend Gunso's Rageblade for Annie. Gunso's Rageblade is a common relic, so you can equip it immediately, and it has attack, grant me +1/+1 permanently. Annie, of course, is a card that you want to play on turn 1, and if you summon her on turn 1 and you attack with her without Gunso's Rageblade, she's going to deal 2 damage to the enemy nexus, and you're going to have a 0/2. That's pretty good. But if she has Gunso's Rageblade, she gets +1/+1. Now you're going to deal 3 damage to the enemy nexus instead of 2, and you're going to have a 1/3 left over. That is very, very different. So a 1/3 obviously is a big difference over a 0/2, because now she can actually block. And then let's say that your opponent it's turn 2 for your opponent. They take their turn. They don't really threaten you in any way. Maybe you just take a little bit of damage. Comes back to you. Now you can potentially attack with Annie again. And if your opponent has a unit that has 2 or less health, they can't really block her, because the Pyromania is going to go over it. If you have her level 1 skill, then they need to have 3 health. They need to have 4 health to block, because she'll take 3 damage. And of course, if you have both upgrades, then it's 4 damage. So it's going to be nigh impossible for them to actually block Annie and kill her on turn 2, so they won't. Now Annie is a 2/4, and you've dealt an additional 2 damage with the second attack. That's great. In Legends of Runeterra, a 2/4 is essentially like a 3 mana card. They'll either usually be a 4/2, a 3/3, or a 2/4. And a 2/4 like vanilla is acceptable. A 2/4 with a really, really good ability, like attack, deal 2 to my blocker, that's insane. And then anything beyond it being a 2/4 is just gravy. Like, that's all you need for this relic slot. So because she's so cheap, because she's so easy to summon, and because she really likes attacking, Gunso's Rageblade is my recommendation. Now, when you get her rare relic upgrade, I would keep Gunso's Rageblade to start with. Once you get to 2 relic slots, 1 rare, 1 common, you can move your Gunso's Rageblade down to the common slot, and then for the rare slot, we have Troll King's Crown, which is all of your allies have Overwhelm. Now, obviously, this is an equipment, so it has to be on Annie. Annie has to be on the field for this to benefit you, for you to get this benefit. But it's huge. So one of the biggest problems with Gunso's Rageblade Annie is that if you have Annie as like a 5/10, and your opponent chooses to block her, and then her Pyromania destroys the unit, well, you don't get any benefit out of that. But giving her Overwhelm means that if you get chump blocked by like a 1/1, well, now Annie will still hit the Nexus. And then, of course, that also buffs all of her other units. So the Prefect getting the Prefect has Overwhelm, that's great. The The Greyback has Overwhelm. That's also great. But what about, the Mana Soul student that's a 4/5? What about, your 3/1 Spell Striker? Like, giving all of them Overwhelm along with any other champions you pick up is very, very good. So yeah, I would recommend that as like your second tier relic. And then beyond that, you guys will be experienced enough that you'll be able to figure out your own build. I mean, some other good ones are, of course, Luden's Echo, which is the same thing as Pyromania. Luden's Echo is literally all your spells and skills deal 1 extra damage, and it stacks with Pyromania. So you could potentially have, if you get 3 Luden's Tempests, then you have all your spells and skills deal 3 extra damage, which stacks with your 2 copies of Pyromania, so all your skills deal 5 extra damage. Now your Magic Emperors is just hitting your opponent for 6 every time that it triggers, and you just kill your opponent really fast. So that could be like your end game, but you have to get 3 rare slots first, which is going to require her to be level 30. Anyway, that's Annie the Dark Child. My name is Serafi, and I was thrilled to have all of you with me.